Oh, I'm okay. We thought we'd be mic'd up to go the other way around, but there you go.
I don't know how we're going to do this now.
Okay, we have to rethink everything.
Do I have to ask the questions from back to front?
Yes, you do, really. It sounds a lot ominous when we were talking. I sounded like I was making thunder.
I think we're getting ready to have some heavy metal.
I'm sure that's being sorted.
With that accent, even when there's feedback, you sound great.
Not to me, I don't.
So, shall we go ahead and start?
Why not?
To start, so much of what you've written in Simply Nigella and in the previous books is about cooking kind of as a restorative, cooking as a calm place. But so many people get so frantic when it comes to cooking. I guess maybe that's one reason they're buying our books. Why do you think people get so nervous about cooking? What freaks people out?
I think, cooking can be very stressful. Mainly because there's so much weight of expectation. I think chiefly, though, the reason why people get very stressed about cooking is because what is thought of to be cooking now, I'm finding this building of drama as I speak, right? I think
it's full of brass, actually.
I think people think cooking is something that's done by restaurant chefs, and restaurant chefs dominate television and they dominate the food world. And I understand why, and chefs are admirable and inspiring people. Well, certainly, what they cook, they can be. But the difficulty is what they create is not food that can be made, can be replicated or should be replicated in a domestic kitchen. And so already you're at a disadvantage if you're a home cook, as I am. And I think that, so I find cooking a great way of decompressing. But if I were stirring something and thinking, now I need a sugar thermometer, and also in what stage do I have to take the next 3 pans off the stove, I would feel terribly stressed, and I would feel like someone was setting me an exam.
Right.
So I think cooking can be complicated, but it can be very simple. And I really feel that one shouldn't be apologetic about cooking being simple, because really flavors can be complex, and the amount of pleasure you get from cooking can be quite profound. But nevertheless, by simple, I mean that the processes themselves don't need to be complicated.
It's getting the most out of the least.
I think also that, I don't always think cooking isn't always restorative, but I think it provides a different sort of busyness. And I think that one of the things in the modern world is people are so obsessed with this idea that relaxing means doing nothing. Well, for me, doing nothing actually is not always a great recipe for relaxation, whereas doing something that is focused but not terribly challenging or demanding, which is the sort of cooking I do on a daily basis, it can be more relaxing.
I find sometimes it's almost like there's a Zen kind of thing when you're focused and you're paying attention and you're doing one thing after another, and you're particularly paying attention that it forces you to be in the moment in a way where you're not thinking 10 steps ahead and you're not thinking about what you have to do tomorrow and all of the rest of that.
I think that's exactly that. And Adam Gopnik often refers to a sort of Japanese phrase, which is chop wood, carry water. And there is that element to everyday cooking. But of course, it's not understandable if the sort of cooking you're doing is performance art. Mm-hmm. And I also think that for a lot of people who don't cook in a way what might feel like the boring stuff, the everyday, just getting supper on the table.
Right.
But then expect to be able to cook when they have friends over, or to go in for very adventurous entertaining. And it's a bit like thinking, you haven't passed your driver's, you just get your driver's license, and then suddenly you're just thinking, that's it, I'm going to NASCAR or Formula One. You do need a bit to get into the rhythms of the kitchen before you can feel at ease there.
That leads really nicely into my next question.
Is it about driving?
It's about driving, yes, or drivers. So this is the perfect time to talk about kind of the frenzy in the kitchen, because we're leading into the holidays, and it's like when people who barely know where their stoves are, all of a sudden decide that they're going to be turning out 12-course meals out of the French Laundry cookbook. But in your book, you've got some really great tips for the driver's license
Yes.
cook. So give me your points on entertaining.
I will give you my points on
Without
entertaining.
going crazy.
Okay. Well, I think really it's slightly linked to what I said earlier, which is I think the great sticking point is that everyone wants to sort of overreach themselves. So what I do when I know I've got people coming over is I do a list. I have a clipboard like that to make myself more in control. And I write a list of everything I think I want to cook. And then I go and I make myself a cup of tea and I come back to the table and I cross about half the things off. Because I know that in a moment of excitement and ambition, I've thought, I really wanted to do all that, and actually it is too much food, and I can't do all this, and it's not reasonable. And then, so I don't do starters when I have people over. I mean, I do have something to feed people before everyone sits down. And I just feel something on the table over drinks, or sometimes I manage to dragoon someone into passing some food around. A dip, something with chips and crudité. Sometimes I would think it wouldn't even matter if it were just some nuts, frankly, but it's something I can do ahead. I've been going through a bit of a thing of cooking Brazilian cheese bread. When I was in Brazil, often people had in their freezer that they'd made earlier and just put it in the oven. So suddenly you're giving people warm bread, and it's very easy,
That's
the
brilliant.
cheese bread, because it's just, it isn't actually anything used to, it's quick. So that sort of thing, I always make someone else be in charge of drinks. I don't even lay the table. You see, I think for most people, they think it sounds like I would be worried, but actually, it's very relaxing if there's a DIY element to eating. Mm-hmm. So I don't leave it in a mess. It can be beautiful. So canisters of cutlery on the table, so you make someone to put the knives out and someone the forks, or get there, and it gives a little interplay. It makes people mix, and I feel that that's fine, and I like that, and I find formality stops people from having fun, and I always say to people, look, I really am a greedy person, and I like eating, but when I've gone out for supper at someone's house, or had people round at mine, if the best thing that could be said about the evening is that the food was good, then I feel it's not very a successful evening. You just want to think, I've had a really great time, that I laughed. Right. That was, I felt very close to everyone who was there. That's very, very important.
Well, it almost seems like, with the focus on, as someone who's been writing about food for 30 years, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but the focus on food and the attention that we pay to food today, and to the preparation of food and the presentation of food, it kind of misses the point of what food's about in the first place, which is it's just an occasion to bring people together. People don't come together for the food. It's just the food is there.
And it facilitates everything, because you just suddenly, because it is pleasurable, and it's a meaningful act to feed people and to feed yourself, which is why I think it's very important to cook for oneself as well. But I do think as well, it's very hard, isn't it? Because if you write about food, and to some extent, the people always want to know, what have you got that's new that you can do that's new for the holidays. But in a way, the truth is, the holidays are about ritual and repetition, and you don't really need to be doing anything new at all.
Right. Which,
you
just led me to my next question. This is brilliant. And it is the holidays.
It's
really
a bit like
are-
Groundhog Day when he knows all the when he knows the answers. He just starts doing the answers before the things. Yeah.
The holidays really are about ritual dinners, and the menus that we serve are connected, are so intimately connected with like our family history.
Yes.
You know, at my house we always serve New Mexican pozole for our Christmas party, and then we always have Dungeness crab for Christmas Eve. You know, what are your ritual foods, and where do they come from?
Well, my ritual for Christmas is very much like your Thanksgiving, really, which is the cranberry sauce. My mother always had it from a jar. I make it. Once I realised how easy it was to make, and everyone seems to think because most people grew up with it not being made fresh, they think it's difficult. I don't understand why. And I'm quite kitsch, so I do add my tradition is also to add a sort of liqueur. We don't have a thing in England about not giving bits of alcohol to children, so it doesn't matter. And also it's cooked, and not many children like cranberry sauce, because I don't like it too sweet. So I have one I call my redder than red cranberry sauce, which I use cherry brandy, not like kirsch, but the one that is actually the colour of sort of melted down, it's just the essence of redness, melted down stained glass windows, I always think of it like. And I have a turkey, which I brine. My mother always had a ham as well, and I do my ritual is a ham on Christmas Eve, because then after Christmas you have to, then you have cold ham and cold turkey, which is important.
So you've got sandwiches for like 2 months.
Well, if I share with my sister, so whoever's not doing the cooking, whoever hasn't got the food at her house takes half the leftovers. That's the deal. We always have chestnuts and Brussels sprouts. We always have roast potatoes, always cooked in goose fat. And with all the women in my mother's family, her sisters and everyone, which I do too, and we all cook our potatoes with a bit of semolina. We dredge them in semolina before putting them in the hot goose fat. So that's just a family way. Yeah, it is. Adds a little teeny bit of crunch and sweetness. And we have something which will probably there are quite a few Brits here, but for those who aren't, it's going to sound disgusting. But we have to have bread sauce and bread sauce. So bread sauce.
Right.
It's a very old thing, and you in the morning you put the milk on and you peel and I often don't bother to peel it. Halve an onion, stud it with cloves, get some mace and bay leaves, and also some salt and pepper, and heat it up, and then let that infuse. And that, for any British person, is the smell of Christmas morning. And then later on, you put stale bread and stir it together, and that is a sauce. So it's really, for us, it's fantastic. We can't have our turkey without it. I brine my turkey, which is really something I learnt from Americans, and I'm totally captivated by this technique. I love it. And then we have our Christmas pudding, which we set fire to.
On purpose?
On purpose. And many houses have had accidents on Christmas Day because of it. I filmed a Christmas special once, and we had borrowed a table, very expensive, from the Conran shop. And I was doing my thing of setting fire to the Christmas pudding, and I spilt some of, I was saying that actually it burns longer and purer if you do vodka. It's traditional to do brandy. And I took it to the table, and as I did it, I spilt some, and the producer was staring as I had a Johnny Cash Ring of Fire going around the whole wooden table.
It wasn't a ring of fire, it was a table of fire.
No, it didn't set fire to it, because it did just say that, but I could see that he thought he wasn't going to get the money back on that.
When people talk about comfort food, they're usually talking about things that they like to eat. But I think for cooks, there's a comfort in there's a comfort in cooking certain foods. Everybody has kind of the dishes that they fall back on. Not fall back on. That's not when you've had a bad day. What instead of like what do you want to eat? What do you like to cook?
Yes, they are quite linked, though, aren't they? I feel that one of the things I rather like cooking, I mean, this which is in one of my previous books, I had a chapter on risotto called "The Solace of Stirring," and I think there's something about risotto which is wonderfully bolstering to make, because unlike a lot of cooking, I mean, because that's the way I cook, it has something more in common with baking in that respect, which is you've got to be pretty rigorous about maintaining the ratio of rice to liquid, and you've got to stay there. You've got to add, you don't add the next ladleful of rice until that one ladleful has been absorbed. So you can't be on your phone, you can't be thinking of anything else, you're just doing that. And risotto is not something that should be made for large groups, and it's not something you should eat in restaurants. And it really is, for me, making risotto is sort of, I'm just there, I'm just in my stove, and I have to pay just enough attention that I put the stock in at the right time, but I'm not actually doing anything except stirring. That's all that's required of me.
It's so funny because I would say risotto too. It's because you're cooking, but you're not really cooking.
No.
I mean, it's not demanding. You go through the ritual, you chop the vegetables, so you do a little bit of the prep. So it's just enough cooking that you actually feel like you've done something, and then you're stirring, and it's like, oh yeah, okay. But it's not like there's no high wire act with it.
No, but I think that's, a lot of cooking is similarly straightforward, and it's just that people either want to get too fancy with risotto, something which appalls Italians, and add too many ingredients.
Right.
When actually the plainer the better, I think, often. But I also think, of course, then it feeds into this particular love I have of food I call bowl food, which is in book 2, which is that thing of one of the great pleasures of risotto, which is just as you're doing the same action of stir, 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 when you eat, every mouthful is the same. And that, I think, on days when you need something to be comforting,
it's constant.
That's the way you eat it is also comforting.
Right,
but,
right.
But I think, there are other things that are purely personal as well, that maybe making, cooking a chicken in the way that my mother did, and the way suddenly the house is full of the smell of sort of lemony chickeniness, which I like too. So it really does depend, because if I'm very hungry and in a bad temper, sometimes I feel that I want some ritual that feels more expansive than just the focus of the stirring. And sometimes, I do think sometimes like a big soup, or putting some chicken into an oven or in a pot. I go like that.
Now, one of the wonderful things about the book, about all of your books, is that, food seems to be, the food that's in them seems to be so integral. I mean, it's just a natural part of your life. I love you had a line in this one about not reaching for strenuous originality, which I thought was really
well.
Really
I've written out this before, that the modernists, when they had a dictum which is make it new, and the thing is that it just really doesn't work in cooking.
But sometimes a lot of the recipes that you have are just really simple things that you just happen to really love, and that you want to share with people. But not everyone approves of that. I don't know whether you followed it or not, but you caught some flack recently on social media about avocado toast.
But that was kind of willfully misunderstood, if one's being charitable, because it's in the book, because I've done an accompanying recipe for some pickled radishes. But when I did it on TV, I said, look, I know this is not a recipe, but
it's delicious.
Whatever. No, but what I mean is, I actually said, I know this is not a recipe,
right.
But it is delicious. But also, non-recipe recipes are fine. But I kind of preempted anything.
But they ignored it.
But ignored it. But that's okay. But the point is, if more people get to know about the wonders of avocado toast, that's a good thing in my book.
Well, how do you decide what makes a dish good enough to go into a book?
I think I have to feel that I want to cook or make some things repeatedly. And I think because I cook things at home and for meals, not in sort of laboratory conditions, it's not enough that a recipe works. That if I don't feel I want to cook it again, and sometimes there are certain recipes that I have to forbid myself to, I feel like you've made that too often now. Stop. But I used to have a test when my children were younger, which was, and I still do it, but not with quite that setup, but the premise remains the same, which is I would imagine myself walking them to school, because I live in a place where you can walk people to school, and I would imagine that a fellow parent at the school gates would be saying, "Oh, I'm making your fill in, what's missing for supper tonight." And if in my head, as I was thinking about whether I put the recipe in the book, I'm thinking, well, I think I might say, why don't you try the other chicken first? Then I knew the recipe shouldn't be in there. But if I felt like, that's fantastic, tell me what it tastes like tomorrow, then I knew it had to go in. So I suppose I have to feel really, absolutely, I'd go to the barricades for that recipe, which is why I have a self-imposed session, which I call sit with myself, and it's called Choose It or Lose It. And I go through, and if I have to feel I really would fight. And then there's a second culling because I always write at too great a length. So rather than take my voice out of the recipes, I remove 25 from this book.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, the recipes, the way that you write recipes is really charming, and that it's very chatty. It really feels like it's somebody. I mean, that's the cliche. It's somebody sitting in the kitchen with you and telling you how to do things. How do you balance kind of getting those telling details that a cook wants to know, and doing it in an informal way so it doesn't seem prescriptive?
Yes,
but
well,
also not nattering on for like.
Well, sometimes I feel I natter on for too long. I think a lot of my nattering is done in the introduction. It worries me if people do attempt a recipe without reading the introduction, because there may be discussions of what substitutes can be used or how it might behave differently under different weather conditions, or my ideas of what might be good to serve alongside. But I try to keep the instructions pretty uncluttered, but I can't, every now and then I can't resist but add something that I think. I don't know, it so took me by surprise that I entered this field that but I found it was, I found my voice, I suppose, and so therefore I stick to that, and I feel that it doesn't always work these days, when I put things on my website after they've been a book. I do sometimes have to trim more, because then people are reading on phones and that's difficult. But nevertheless, I do think voice is important. And there are many ways of getting information about ingredients and recipes, but they're not in a book, and that's a different, you have to, whatever you do, you have to make it right for that particular medium.
Right.
And in the same way as when I do TV, it's difficult because, I won't be scripted or anything, but nevertheless, you can't, you've got a different sort of relationship, but in both my books and on television, for me, it's primarily a relationship established by words. And what led me into this field was someone who was because I had a very pronounced interest in language, and to me it seemed that language, which, however evocative it is essentially abstract, and I wanted to know how I could use that in the service of a realm of the senses, which is food and the texture, the taste, the smell, and that's what led me to it more than anything else.
Your TV shows are very, they seem to me to be very, more tightly, the language is, it's more tightly edited. And so in some ways, you'll be doing, because the TV shows are very action. There's a lot.
But there's
going
introductions. There are introductions, but I mean, if you say so, I don't watch them. I mean, I know when I do it, I ramble on for hours. But obviously they're edited down. Well, they have to be, because in the end, ultimately, you can't have each episode running for 7 hours.
But what I was going to say, the language when you hit one of those lines, and on the television show, it really pops because it is so spare, and all of a sudden there's like beautiful language coming out. It's when you're writing a book, do you have a reader in mind, and how would you describe them?
I don't have a reader exactly. When I started, I think it was very much a family thing, and I was continuing a conversation with my mother and one of my sisters who died young, and both of them died young, and that was part of what I was doing. But then I also had a particular friend, and maybe this came later, my second book it was more, I had a particular friend who was quite nervous of being in the kitchen. She'd been brought up, as many women of my generation had, by a mother, this was not my experience, but it's many women friends of my generation. It's their experience, a mother who, above all else, didn't want her daughter to go into a kitchen, didn't want her daughter to have a life of domestic drudgery, and for one thing, yes, for one reason or another, and therefore she had a certain lack of ease in the kitchen, and didn't quite know how she fitted into it and how she could be the person she was with a job and a very dynamic and confident existence outside the home, and how that could fit in with being home. And I just felt at the time I didn't like the idea of anyone, male or female, being ill at ease in a kitchen, because it seemed to me such a central place, even if it's just a refrigerator and a teeny bit of a half a stove, but nevertheless, so I had her in mind a bit, somehow wanting to encourage her to get in the kitchen without quite realizing it.
Right.
But now, I don't know, now it's in a way I feel that I have a community of readers, and it's a conversation which I'm continuing, so I don't, as much as possible when I write, it's a bit like when I'm stirring my risotto, writing is, as much as possible, I'm just there, with my relationship is with the words. But beyond that, I do feel my relationship is with my readers, but I don't have, I don't try and think, is this wanted, is this not wanted? I kind of feel I just do what I do.
Obviously, it's kind of working. You're very frank in your books about kind of developing mad passions for ingredients sometimes. I think all cooks do that. You wrote in the book about the editor who referred to your first book as the pea marsala and rhubarb cookbook.
Yes.
So what ingredients are you crushing on
Yes,
now?
well, it's still rhubarb, and I have to say, this is the first time I have met Russ, but I have a quote from him, from a wonderful piece he wrote about rhubarb. And so rhubarb, it still features, not as much as I'd like, but I just feel like I've got to stop sometimes. There is a return to my love of licorice. It's one of those divisive ingredients.
And you mean licorice, not anise? Right?
No, I mean actual licorice.
Licorice.
I mean licorice. Although the anise I also like. But there is a lot of fresh ginger, masses of ginger. And that's partly because I love ginger, and it's one of those things like chili, also a lot of, which the more you eat, the more you want to eat. But also because if you're cooking at home, when you buy a ginger root, if you don't use it up pretty quickly, it's all going to get wizened and dried out and sad. Therefore, I use it quite a lot, and then so a lot of ginger. I surprised myself by really cooking quite a bit with coconut oil.
That's what I was going to mention, because I
And that's partly because I bought a tub of it and then I had to use it a lot. And I feel like that's how I behave and that's how my readers do as well. What are you going to do? Buy a big tub and then it's 2 tablespoons used? But I like the way it worked when I fried with it. And then I thought I'd try it in baking, and that...
I've never used it. Does it have a flavor?
It does,
flavor,
but
or is it just more of
you can get it when it hasn't got a flavour. I like the one that's got a flavour, but really weirdly, it seems to know when to make its flavour pronounced and when not to. And so when
It's smart,
it's really, so if I'm doing it and I want to get that slightly tropical taste going, it comes to the fore. And the other times I think, because I'm not someone who wants a lot of coconut flavour in a cake necessarily, unless I'm making a coconut cake. But I've got to use it in recipes, and I just don't think, maybe once you start putting lemon zest or else you've got cocoa or something else going on, then it doesn't make it so prominent. But for example, I've got a recipe that I really do like, which is a stir-fried rice with Brussels sprouts and bean sprouts, and then I've gone a bit, Hawaiian, and I've got a bit of pineapple and some chili and the coconut oil there. Suddenly I can taste the coconut. Suddenly I feel that's it. Okay, I'm, on holiday.
We had talked about this a little bit, but Simply Nigella is your first book since that horrible year of 2013. And you write in your introduction that with this book that you had to cook yourself strong. What did you mean by that, and how did the construction of the book, as opposed to kind of the testing of the developing and the testing of the recipes, how did that play a part in cooking yourself strong?
Well, I think you probably know what it means, but I think that to some extent, cooking, as I said before, if cooking is an act of generosity when you feed other people, it is no less so when you're feeding yourself, and that is an important thing to be doing, because it's important in the way that people who say, "Oh, I don't bother to cook; it's just for me," that in itself tells you something that's quite a sad thing, and I think it's quite a forceful and strengthening thing to cook for yourself. I also feel that, again, it's about those routines, and as I said, that sometimes you don't always feel like cooking. I didn't always feel like cooking, but I had to get supper on the table, and that is a bit like work, which is whether you feel like doing your work or not, you have to, and it's those things you have to do, whether you feel like it or not, that actually are the things that make you feel good and get you through any difficult time. And I think there is, so I think it's a mixture of routine and also I think cooking requires a certain amount of playfulness, and there's a lightness in thinking about flavor and adding maybe a different spice or a different herb that in itself is all actions in a way bring on more of what they're doing, in the sense that you learn how to cook by cooking, I can never remember, but there's two sorts of, Pascal had two sorts of grace. One was grâce efficace, and one was, I can't remember now from studying it, but I do know it was that thing of, it didn't matter whether you had faith or not. If you acted as if you did, sooner or later you would. And I said, I'm sorry, fake it till you make it. Well, yes, I kind of like Pascal's way, a bit more, but yes, but it isn't. I never felt I'm faking it when I cook. I'm absolutely there. But again, it's what you were saying before. It's that thing of being in the moment, and being in the moment is the best place to be.
And there's something restorative about craft, about doing something that you know that you can do well, and finding yourself getting back in the stride of it, I would imagine.
Yes, I think so. But certainly I think that when I don't cook, I don't feel wholly like myself.
That's interesting. I'm always struck by the differences between the American and the British cookbook scenes, and it's almost like we're two completely different worlds that just happen to coincidentally share the same language.
Well, that's what George Bernard Shaw
Oh,
felt. He says...
no, he took it from me.
He two nations divided by a common language.
There's exceptions, but like I don't think most British readers would know Fanny Farmer very much, and most American readers wouldn't know Delia Smith. But as one of just a handful of cookbook writers who are popular on both continents, what are the main differences between the two?
It's very difficult to say exactly what the differences are, because there are some ways in which there's like a Venn diagram. I don't know if you ever did those at school. There is an overlap, but where I'd say the outside parts of that Venn diagram is that, and we in England are changing, that I think that the books are much more precise in America. The amount of instruction is wanted, and the amount of I suppose I wouldn't say hand-holding, because I think hand-holding is good, but the amount of
precision?
No, it's much more about the authority of the writer. The cookbook author in America generally is someone who knows better than you do, whereas I think that the cookbook author, in the English tradition, is someone who's sharing her or his experience and enthusiasm.
With an equal.
I would say that Jane Grigson, it's presuming upon someone being interested and maybe having a better idea themselves while reading it. So that's it. It's not really about precision. It's about the presumption of authority.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's and I'm sure there are many, many exceptions
Are your
to
books
that.
different? Do you edit your books differently for the United States?
Not only in terms of ingredients. Not in terms of voice. Measurements. And we obviously, said double cream, heavy cream, and and they're never quite the same. And every time I come here on. If I've got a book out, I think, oh no, some more things I've got to change. I don't realise some ingredients, but I certainly don't change my voice. And sometimes, not now, but I'm always, an editor will say to me that we don't use that word. That word doesn't exist in America, and I say, and nor in Britain. Actually. But it is true that some American editors I have to fight more, because they will presume a reader can't work out what I'm saying.
Right.
And I just say, my readers are not stupid.
Good for you. What about flavor palettes?
Well, if I'm inspired by an American recipe, and it's a baking recipe, I will automatically reduce the sugar before I even try it the first time. And I find that nearly every American writer uses more sugar. And yet, no one in America has ever said to me, your desserts aren't sweet enough.
So who are some of your favorite writers that we ought to be knowing about?
Well, I know there's a writer I admire an awful lot, and I know you do, but I don't know how well known she is in the States generally, Diana Henry.
Right.
And she's
great books.
She's a wonderful
food
writer.
Here too.
They are.
Very available.
They are. And Nigel Slater is published here, but I'm not sure how widely I know his earlier books were more. I think he's very good. I keep falling off his like someone in a bar who's got drunk. We just discussed at some stage that that Ottolenghi is incredibly popular here, which is in a way interesting.
Incredibly popular.
Yeah, which is, he's wonderful, and in every way. But it's interesting because in England I understand it because he's got his restaurants and here not. But there's another. There's a couple who used to work in his restaurants, who got their own place now, and it's called Honey & Co., and their books are rather wonderful. Have you come across them?
No,
I don't know his name. I don't know his wife's name. Isn't on the. She's the Honey of Honey & Co. That's not her real name, but he's called something like Itamar Surelovich. But it's got something. But anyway, if you put Honey and Co, or, you know, Google it, and there's a rather charming film about them that was made about them that's on the Guardian website, and their books are wonderful. And the books of Sam and Sam Clark, who've got Morrow and Morita, they're interesting. I like those.
Those are good books.
I think also we've got Sabrina Gayor, I think.
Yes.
She's coming over, or she is, and she's being translated, and that's a...
She's a Persian writer.
Yes.
She writes Persian cooking.
Yes, and her new one, actually, is called, you know, Scirocco, and it's going to be very east-west. Which I think I think will be interesting. And she also, I think she's got an ability to make her recipes feel easily doable, and I think she really inspired a lot of people to try Persian influence cooking and not feel bad about themselves if they didn't have every single one of those right ingredients. And that's to me, that really is what cooking is like, because cooking is like language. Food is like language, which is we adapt, we change, we borrow some words from one country, and some of them stay as if they're foreign, and some we completely become part of our own language. And the same is true with cooking. You know, the purest, that French approach, whether this is the right way of cooking something, seems to me to be a sterile way of approaching living entities, which both cooking and language are.
And it seems artificial too, because I mean, in every home, I mean, as opposed to restaurants, I mean, home cooks don't follow the rules. I mean, the dishes may be similar, but you know, your your mom's pot au feu may be completely different than your next door neighbor's. So,
I know.
What is the authentic version of that?
And that's the difficulty. Everyone wants to know the one authentic version. There's an
that's Italian.
The Ur recipe. The Ur recipe has to be known.
It's good, but that's not the right one.
Yeah.
So you're an absolute monster on social media. You have almost 1 million Twitter followers. You've got almost 370,000 followers on Instagram.
Well, and what I do, actually, that's not considered a lot. I'm rather new to Instagram. I'm not even a year yet. When I put it off because I just thought, no, I'm more of a words person. I like Twitter. Although I was late. It took me a long time to get onto Twitter too. I just thought, no, it's not for me. No, I am. I mean, I do it myself, which means the only thing that really gets me slightly irritated is when people say, can you ask your social media person? And I'm like, what? Is it not absolutely clear I do it myself? Which is why I feel very bad for my countrymen and women, which is that my recipe of the day has been going out late afternoon while I've been on the West Coast. I go through periods when I'm quite active, and then sometimes I'm not, either because I haven't got a signal, or because my phone's off for a while, or because I don't feel like it. But I enjoy it, actually.
What is it that you like about it?
I like the sense of community.
If I could ask, because you're so big on Twitter and you're so big on Instagram, you don't do Facebook at all. So
I do.
Those are very different. They're very different media. So what is it that you like about the ones that
and
you
do? And I do Facebook a bit. I do the odd post. I do my recipe of the day, and I do and I do occasionally. We'll put a picture up. But I can't get to grips with Facebook. I do Pinterest actually as well, which I quite like. And when I was doing my house, I have to say I was absorbed for hours on it. But Facebook, I've never quite come to terms with, and I got to grips with, and I actually do mean to. And I go on there, but also because it's so big, I feel I can't quite read. There are too many comments and too many things to do. And I did a Q&A, a live Q&A on Twitter, on Facebook recently, and the people from Facebook came around, and I did it at home so I could learn how to do it, but they were telling me all these other things I could do, and I just thought, but when am I going to get my work done? So that slightly panicked me, whereas I feel that maybe there's something about Twitter or Instagram that I can, it really is just a picture of what I've eaten or something I like, and that's easy, or I'm answering someone's query about a recipe or something makes me laugh, and it's quite contained, whereas I feel that Facebook, I don't know whether, you know, I don't know where the borders are.
Right. But social media is very much a double-edged sword. I mean, you've got, you know, millions of die-hard fans, but then there's also kind of there's a hardcore nastiness in a lot of social media. How do you develop a thick enough skin? Well, because I know that you do your own, so you're obviously reading when people are talking.
But I have to say, maybe I miss it. I feel that it's such a small percentage of nastiness I get on Twitter that it doesn't, and I just reach for the block button. I don't understand why people ever engage with this. But this is my view on both Twitter and Instagram, which is, you're coming into my house. I don't want rude, unkind people. And it's really just about manners. And I just think, and I really don't like it sometimes if I say something to someone and then on my Twitter feed and then everyone lays into that person. And I've just meant to say, like, actually, no, I disagree with them, and they're perfectly entitled. You know, I like having disagreements, so I don't mind if someone doesn't agree with me. But then if I say, no, I did it for this reason, everyone says, yeah, why did you say that? Or why? And I think, well, no, don't be nasty to that person. And then I feel to blame because I've encouraged this just by having a dissenting view.
Mentality.
And so I find that difficult, but I don't actually mind if people are nasty to me. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, no one wants some people nasty, but it doesn't make me worry me it doesn't worry me that way because, what are you going to do?
Well, as a perfect example, and speaking of skin, you know, when I posted something on Facebook about us doing this event, and I mentioned that you were pretty, and I got yelled at, and then I asked people for questions, you know, for longtime readers and fans. I mean, what would you like to ask? And the one question that everybody seemed to want to know was about your skincare regimen. So,
No.
Tell us.
But the thing I'd say is that, you know, in a way, I suppose, you know, it's a mixed group. I always say to everyone, I'm a broad church.
So you're not going to tell us?
Well, it's just, what, you really want to know about my skincare?
Well, obviously,
is that what your career and mine has come to? You want that, Russ?
Good point. Maybe we ought to turn it over to the audience.
I don't mind, but I mean, I'm just thinking of you here.
I've got no reputation left, so we're fine.
Okay, and I scrub my face every night with a muslin cloth. Or never go in the sun, factor 50, or you call it SPF 50 even in winter.
Audience questions.
Okay, if you'd have any questions, raise your hands and I'll bring the microphone to you.
We can't really see, so.
Any questions?
This is so silly. I can't believe I'm actually going to ask you this, but
I can't see you, so I don't know where to look.
I'm right here.
There.
Hi. Do you tape out of your actual kitchen? Because each of your series has a different, you know, each How to Be a Domestic Goddess. The kitchen is different from Feast. Is different from this one?
I filmed in my own kitchen at the beginning when I had to. When my children were very small, and also my husband was ill and I couldn't leave, so I filmed at home, and then later on I couldn't. I mean, the difficulty is after a while it becomes such an imposition on other people. So the fact is that when you're filming you can't have any noise, so you've got really saying to everyone, excuse me, could you now halt your lives, because what I'm doing is more important. So I don't film my programs at home, but I take the pictures of my books at home, and it's just that I've had various kitchens. So in the books, the food shoots are at home, but they certainly often will make a set that draws on my actual kitchen.
So when I didn't realize that your first series was filmed in your house. I mean, with cables.
I know.
That must have been craziness.
It was a bit, but it was the only way it was manageable. It wasn't completely crazy. It was the little hours of mad, but it was quite. But that's what I said. You know, I didn't want to do TV, and in the end I said, well, I'll do it if I can do it at home, and I don't have a script, and I can just witter on. But the poor sound man, as I was pulling open drawers and going through, trying to find the right knife or spoon or something.
On camera.
Yes, but I still have all my bits and pieces when I'm filming, even though the kitchen's it's a real kitchen. I mean, we build a set around it, but it is my stuff. And I feel anyway, once you start cooking and you're doing everything, it doesn't really matter where you are. It's just your food.
It's home.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that you studied medieval and modern languages, and I wanted to know how you went from that to how to be a domestic goddess. How is the tie?
Well, it's not a particularly interesting career trajectory. I was a journalist. I was mostly books and arts, book reviews, interviewing writers, artists, anyone who featured on the arts pages. And then I wrote about food a bit, carried on, became an op-ed columnist, but still did a teeny bit of food, and I have an interest in language. I mean, the point is, a degree is not a diploma. A degree is about education and awakening interests. So I feel I resist the idea that you have a particular degree and then you apply it to a particular line of work. Now, obviously, if you're a lawyer or a doctor or an architect, yes, you need these things. But otherwise, in a way, education is something entirely other. And so everything I do comes out of the interests I have in life, the books I've read, and the ideas that have been fostered there, but doesn't mean to say that I then find an outlet, to write about, 12th century Italian poetry, although I might. I don't know if that answers your question, but, the thing is in life, things aren't generally planned. I never thought I'd do what I do, and yet I do at the moment. And I don't actually know what one would do apart from being an academic with my degree, particularly, anyway.
That's one of the interesting things about food writing. In particular, it seems like there's so many people who are in it, and speaking for myself as well, we all kind of washed out of other careers. I'm saying that facetiously, but
That's true.
It makes the dinner party so much more interesting because you've got former lawyers and former doctors and people who decided that they just wanted to do what they wanted to. That this is where they really, this is what they love to do, and
But I think that's true, and I think that I always think anything about food is it's a metaphor for life generally, and there are many different ways of being a person, and there are many different ways of becoming a food writer, and of cooking and of responding to food, and yet those differences are, in a way, is what makes someone's phone is going off in a very annoying ring. It's one of the fact is we might respond to food differently depending on where we're from, but we all respond in about the same way. And that becomes, in the end, it all evens itself out. I feel like the phone is making me lose my train of thought. It probably ended its journey, that thought, anyway.
Hi, I was just wondering how you felt about Southeast Asian food and if there are any favorite Southeast Asian ingredients or recipes of yours.
Did you say Asian food, or did you have a particular...
Southeast Asian
Southeast
food?
Asian food. There's
Yeah.
a lot of... I went to Thailand last year, and even though I've eaten Thai food a lot, I'd never eaten it there. And I was so inspired. There is a lot of Southeast Asian influence in the book. A lot of it is... I tried to make as faithful to the food I ate there as possible, and had to use my phone and videoed people cooking, and some of it is slightly refracted through the prism of my British kitchen. But there's some Thai influences and also some Malaysian influences in the book in terms of Southeast Asia, and I think that's and I'm smiling only because the memory of the food and a Malaysian friend who taught me some of her recipes too. It just make me smile because they make me very happy, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about cooking as well, is it is that thing of sharing recipes. And anyway, you're all going to have to be the one to tell me how authentic my recipes are. But I often do like to say to people that often if I make a Thai recipe, obviously it can never be authentically Thai, whatever I do, because I'm not Thai, and but I always say that what matters to me is that they're authentically good.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you if you cook with your children and if you enjoy cooking with your children.
Do you know, when my children were small, people used to say, do your children help you in the kitchen? And I used to think, well, they cook, but I wouldn't actually call it a help. But yes, I do. I love cooking with my children, and it's a wonderful thing. And for me particularly, I always feel that through cooking and what I can give to them, and I can give them my mother's food, and my mother died at 48, so that they wouldn't, obviously didn't have a chance to know her. And I like to think that their grandchildren and children and whatever will be able to have my mother's food too, and it will be changed, but it will carry on like that. And so I think that there is a wonderful feeling of an important sense of legacy with cooking with children.
Do you find with, because it's also the profession of developing recipes, I remember my daughter used to say, sometimes she'd say, is this dinner or is this a recipe test? But in a funny way, it's like, because we're always, coming up, we're thinking about it, and we're always playing with new things, in a way we're kind of subverting the tradition of it. That, there aren't like 5 dishes. My mom probably had 5 dishes.
Yes. Well, you're right. I suppose in a way we do more. But I feel that when I look through my books, and I can remember so many, I can remember what ages of the children were when I was making that. And I still do make things, from them. It's not that I stop. But, when that recipe got generated. And I quite like that. So it feels like what for a lot of people would be like going through a photo album. And I do it through recipes. So it does feel, in that sense, it does feel related. And it doesn't feel like it's just some flight of fancy that was happening. But also, so much of what I do is also because of what I'm doing, whether I've cooked that for them or thinking about recipes that they can cook for themselves. And I suppose that feels quite important, and in a way that I know that they like it. They're always very encouraging about my books, and so I quite like that. That is good. But except when my son was little, and it was quite a long time ago, when he said, which is rather brilliant, when he said once to me, "Yeah, that was really delicious, Mum. It doesn't matter that it looks disgusting."
It's a good review.
Yeah. And he was right.
I really liked you on The Taste and was really annoyed when ABC cancelled it. Are you looking to do another show here in America, or are any of your UK shows going to be shown here?
I'm not looking to do another show here. If there's a possibility of something which could be interesting, but it's not quite like that. But otherwise, I'm very much hoping that I've got a series that's going out now in the UK and BBC Two, and I'm very much hoping that it will come soon. It will come here, but I'm impatient and I want it to come soon. But I think it's more likely to be next year at this stage, even though I very much wanted to get the Christmas special in the States for this Christmas. But I think the fact that I still haven't finished filming it worried them. However, it will be going out in the UK and in Canada, and possibly even Australia. So
Streaming?
Before.
Will it be available streaming online?
I doubt it, because the BBC is not allowed to do that, is it?
I don't know.
It can be. I think you have to be. You have to be in the UK to go to, unless you do all sorts of nefarious activities, which are not advised. But I think but I think that, anyway, I can see that made people scared.
So we'll do 2 more questions.
I just wanted to know what your favorite memory of food is, whether it was from your childhood or your professional career, anything particular, nostalgic or...
What's my favorite memory of food? The difficulty is, I always feel that if I were to say this is my favorite memory of food, it would make me feel like I was never going to eat again. Do you know what I mean? It feels a bit final. I don't have a lot of fond memories of food from when I was younger. I hated meals and eating.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. It's just the way I was brought up. Just the way I was brought up. You know, you'd have to eat everything that was put in front of you, and if you didn't, it would be brought back to you cold the next meal. And you know, it was a Dickensian upbringing I had. But I suppose that my memories of food that I'm particularly fond are not actually about the food themselves. And so, for example, it's my sister who died. She was 16 months younger than me, and she and I used to have this ritual. She lived quite far away, so when we saw each other, we had a ritual. We'd go back home and we'd make tiramisu salata, and we'd have it with spring onions, scallions, which I couldn't do now. And this is something which will horrify everyone. And we'd have some, you know, crisp bacon with it, and we'd eat that together, and that was very important. And in the same way as that, when my children were little, sometimes for a special treat, and we were watching films, we would have as like a chocolate an ice cream, you know, those that were covered in chocolate in one hand and salt and vinegar crisps in the other. See, a model healthy eating, but it was like a treat for what she was, and it felt like very much part of this exciting, as I say, special treat. And I don't know, those sorts of things. So neither of them are gastronomic experiences exactly, but
Context.
But yes, and actually I still keep that thing, which is, you know, I do add salt to things. So add the bacon to the already salty caramel and so forth.
That was trendy.
And our final question for the evening.
Hi, Nigella. I wanted to talk to you about, I come from a great Southern cook. I'm the daughter of a great Southern cook. And for years I was intimidated, and I think your books kind of helped me know that I can cook. But how do you make the leap from following a recipe to creating a recipe? I've done a few myself, but it's very, you feel unconfident or shaky because you feel like there's a chemistry to cooking that I didn't get in school.
Well, I think that, yeah, but you know, I said earlier you learn to cook by cooking. If there's a chemistry, there is a chemistry, but you can work that out. Oh, this happens when I add heat. But this is how I would say, just to be brief, the way to change from just following recipe to creating recipe is give yourself small steps. Change only 1 or 2 ingredients as you go. And in a way, cooking is science. You can't suddenly change masses of ingredients. You need to change 1 or 2 and see what happens. Oh yes, if I change the beef to lamb, this is what happens. Or if I change, if I change the cabbage to cauliflower, this is going to happen. And the spicing, you know. So I think the thing is change 1 or 2 ingredients and just keep going. And I do think allow yourself to fail. Yeah, you're going to cook something, you want to try a different thing, it doesn't work. Well, as long as you don't give yourself food poisoning, that's fine. Really? And that's one of the wonderful thing about cooking, in a way. It does teach you, it teaches you to be braver in life.
What a great final line. Thank you so much.
Thank you.